UBS, a $1,000 upgrade for Tesla is the question that we answer today, and the implications of the recent upgrade by UBS. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. Wanted to thank our Patreon supporters as well as our subscribers. If you enjoy the show, please take time to like and subscribe. We also appreciate any suggestions that will enhance the show, including show topics or changes we might make in our studio setup to improve execution. So what's happening today is that it's Thursday and we're T-minus 5 business days and counting before Tesla's next round of earnings. So typically there's some chaos before we get into the real earnings, and then afterwards, obviously, there's the after chaos of up or down on the stock price, etc. And so today's sort of show is kind of a preparation for that, and it's more intensive volume given that there's more happening that will set up the stock price. So we decided to do what I call a little bit of a backward show today. The reason it's a backward show is that something just happened, which is that there's a company called UBS, one of the largest banks on Wall Street, and one of their analysts just came out with a $410, I believe, price target for Tesla. And he had raised that from a $150 target price. And so basically, his conclusion was that Tesla's stock price should be sold because it's overrun its fundamentals, and therefore the price that they were targeting for it to head to is about 410, and with it being about 580 right now, clearly that's almost a 200-point cut. So I was really intrigued by that because what I did was, over the last couple of shows, we've pointed out that the market seems to be yo-yoing between the estimates given by different analysts, and we should expect the shorts wouldn't surrender quickly. They would definitely get people to write reports that would support a lower stock price, helping them in their get out of it process. So the title I chose for this show is, did UBS just give Tesla a $1,000 price target? And the reason we came up with that title is that, according to the report by UBS, Tesla, as of 2025, will achieve 1.6 million vehicles in sales at about an 11% margin. And the argument they made was that we're going to see competition emerge from competitors, and then other process elements that limit the growth rate that Tesla enjoys, delivering the numbers that I just described. So I was intrigued because usually, or in the last case of this, Morgan Stanley's analyst had taken time to downgrade Tesla, and he just downgraded on fundamentals. And but he didn't really provide numbers. He just indicated that it had outrun its capabilities. So I was intrigued by this because this time the downgrade came with ways to evaluate the downgrade based on your perspective. And so 1.6 million vehicles at 11% that was described is a real metric that we can hold on to determine the utility of what was said. So our estimates, and why we picked $1,000, is that in China alone, Tesla will sell something like 3 million vehicles, perhaps 4 million vehicles in 2025. So if UBS is targeting 1.5 million vehicles for a $400 stock price, if Tesla is up at 3 million vehicles, or double the number that he gave This is why we're saying he's really giving them a $1,000 stock price, because what we're assuming here on those 3 million vehicles is that you sell nothing from the US factory. So really what he's saying is he's perhaps giving it a $2,000 to $3,000 value, because we know that the US operations aren't going to shut down while only China produces vehicles. But I really think it brings up the absurdity of what's going on. And I'm also impressed because if you'll notice at the open of the markets today, there was a trailing down by 5 to 7 points of the stock price. And then as the smoke cleared to figure out why the prices were down on this downgrade, you saw that the price kind of stabilize and move up. So I think this is getting kind of fun because it looks like people are figuring out that the shorts are controlling what's being said by the analysts, and it's starting to affect what people do. So I made some notes regarding how these numbers might work out. So I wanted to point out that we have an interesting situation because right now we're sort of scheduled for 500,000 vehicles to come out of Fremont this year, particularly with the Model Y arriving. And then China is somewhere between, let's call it 180,000 vehicles and 300,000 vehicles that'll be produced this year. So next year, based on what Elon told us, we're expecting the full complement of 500,000 vehicles to be produced by the facilities in China. So if we add, let's say Germany comes online spring or summer of next year, in theory, you now have another 500,000 units coming out of that facility within a 3 to 6 month period on an annualized basis. So I bring all this up because basically, with a little luck, in 2021 or the end of 2021, the run rate for Tesla will actually be about 1.6 million vehicles. So the fact that UBS is coming out and saying Tesla might do 1.6 million vehicles in 2025, and they're able to do it sort of at the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, again illustrates the point that the numbers that the companies are producing are consistent actually with where its stock price is currently, and may actually be ahead of that in light of the fact that they're able to deliver the numbers way earlier than some of the particularly negative analysts are suggesting. So I wanted to, so the other notes here relative to current valuation and where the stock price is going are, the numbers that UBS provided for the $400, $10 stock price assumed no value for robotaxis, no value for the Cybertruck, no value for the Semi, and I think you get my drift here that there's a number of products. I also had the Roadster there. So the sales numbers assumed sort of removed 4 vehicles that represent at least potentially 1 million units of sales per year that were also removed from our analysis, et cetera. So I think that we're in a sort of an interesting zone here. I think that what we should expect, and I'm seeing now, is that the analysts, if they're going to downgrade with help from money from the hedge funds, they probably want to do it in a way that allows them to use their power to downgrade, but at the same time avoid being specific. Because if you're an MBA from an Ivy League school and you're a partner at one of these firms, you figuring out basic math is a given. And the fact that you can't figure it out suggests that you're doing something that's sort of ridiculous. And so I think that's kind of where we're at on this whole thing, is that it's clearly ridiculous. It's very clear that if Tesla's stock price comes out gangbusters after earnings, it will actually bankrupt and it'll sort of destroy the position of many people and pretty much, wreck a few firms in the process, particularly Jim Chanos and his group. And so we're actually kind of intrigued by how this is working. The one other thing that we wanted to review is Jim Cramer came out and said that Tesla needs to be valued more like a semiconductor company than a car company. And I thought that was an interesting comment. I would have to say that the model that I'm thinking about with Tesla is more like what happened with Apple. Once they introduced first the iPads were doing pretty, the iPods were doing well, and then Apple came out with the iPhone. And all of a sudden, the whole industry realized they had to make this big shift over to what was going on with that phone or be put out of business. So I really feel like, what ended up happening there is with the iPhone, the way consumers were buying it, competitors were of the opinion that there's no way they could avoid moving down that path given the ravenous consumer demand. So they didn't care whether or not they got sued. They were just going to produce a response product and sort of work to catch up to Apple. So in essence, you ended up with an Apple monopoly, and the monopoly was chipped away as you had others enter. Cramer added to his comments and said that, given that the offerings presented by competitors are not getting any kind of consumer adoption at any scale, it's very clear that Tesla is really the solution in that space. So my disagreement with him on the semiconductors is that, yeah, the semiconductor companies are good because when they're really good, there's only one, maybe two people in the world that do what they do, so they get margins that are consistent with that. The challenge, though, I would see with his analysis is Tesla has the potential, given that they charge for electricity, given that they can get a revenue stream going off of the data center and the car, given that there's a number of sort of income streams, the robo-taxis, possibly electricity sales. So there are all these ancillary profit lanes, again, similar to Apple, where they're selling earbuds and there's all the online services, movies, all these things that they're providing. So Apple really has done a great job of leveraging the platform of their phones into other customer relationships and profitability. And so for me, the way Tesla is lining up, I believe that the lineup is a very similar fashion. So I think, though, that we've covered this before and we'll cover it again, and that is that the wild card in this whole thing is what I call the craziness of Chinese math. And the reason for that is that, China has an initiative there, the 25 goals, which include a very significant move to EVs, which Tesla is assisting them with. And they're providing every means to facilitate that, including, discounts to Chinese consumers to buy electric, and then setting up the environment literally for Tesla to take its 80% market share in its segment, given that the competitors are unable to match what Tesla's up to. So we're in an interesting position because when you sort of dig down on this whole thing, there are a lot of sort of Chinese sneak ups that seem to emerge. And the one that I'm watching, and I think that's huge, is that there's kind of a problem right now in China. And the problem is that when the factory was built, Tesla had pre-orders for vehicles that would be produced in China at the price point that was discussed. Now that price point is maybe $8,000 lower. Where I see a problem showing up is the fact that we can use the now 10, possibly 11-week delay for those who choose to order that vehicle as a sign that there's the demand is way outstripping what can be produced there. And so as the Model Y comes in, we think over the next month, maybe two, we're going to see a very interesting situation because the wait times in China could go from 8 to 10 weeks to possibly 20, 30, 40 weeks. And at those kind of wait times is that when the new gigafactory, or effectively the new factory is built in Germany in order to meet, the order run that they're experiencing. And so, we discussed at the front of this show that 1.6 million vehicles in 2025 was what was expected from UBS, but we think that there's an explosion in Tesla's stock price that happens mid-year. And what actually happens is that China could say, in effect, we're just going to put up another gigafactory next door or one major province over and facilitate, cutting down on the long list of demand that Tesla has. So, any rate, we're kind of fascinated by this, and I wanted to kind of present this because we were wondering, and we're kind of finding out now how the market is going to react to routine downgrades by sort of hedge fund funded institutions making negative Tesla comments. And those comments can be, comical, or they can have a little bit of truth with a lot of other ridiculous comments. And so that's kind of where we're at currently. So stay tuned. I think we'll have more obviously on what's going on and keep very much on top of it. The one other thing that I think is kind of fun is after surveys and I do want to survey perhaps to understand, to what extent do you understand options would be good. We have a playlist that focuses on shows that we've done on options trading, et cetera. And, who knows where it's going to go. Tesla could be down 100. Tesla could be up 100. It could be down 150. It could be up $300 or $400 over a short period as we go into earnings. What we did in December before the last explosion in the stock prices, we informed you that, hey, Tesla is not a move 10, 20, 30 point company. It's a 2-day move 200 point company. So a 30 to 50% return on your money on just owning the stock is a real possibility. Clearly, the other side of that loss is also out there. So it's not a bad idea if you have large amounts of money to be playing with to think about hedging your position a little bit, perhaps with options or some other method. So part of the sort of hidden of this show was to kind of upgrade you or update you on sort of what the environment looks like. That way, if you decide to do some trading or you're thinking about what you're going to do, you're sort of armed with more than less information in order to make your decision what you're going to be involved in. Perhaps the last thing I'm going to cover, and I'd love to ask you guys to fire questions so I can answer as we're closing out, is I don't know if you're watching the SARS situation, but that's only 500 miles from Shanghai, where the concentrated portions of what's happening is being seen. So I'm bringing this up because evidently we're in a period now of where, so for example, at Tesla's factory, you'll have a lot of workers who live on premises. And then this would be one of the major holidays that finds everyone going home and then coming back after those holidays to restart work. And so we have no doubt that there are likely workers from that area that can't travel back, given what's going on with SARS. And so I just think that there are going to be some Tesla workers affected. And Tesla has a sales facility there as well that might be affected by all this as well. Yeah, I'm expecting some insane moves. Now, for those of you who watch our show seriously, there's something I'd like to have you observe that I just think is awesome part of trading and trading options. So go on, actually, it's not the best, but Yahoo Finance has an options area that you can look at options. One of the fun data points of learning how to trade and learning how to trade options as part of managing your portfolio is what I call the games that Wall Street plays. And you can kind of watch them in an interesting way. So like right now, stock price 579, today's Thursday. There's a bunch of options that expire on Friday. So what I'd like to have you do is starting at noon Eastern time, I wanted you to go and just note what the stock prices of Tesla at noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 4 o'clock. Then what I'd like to have you do is go over and look in the options string. And when you look at the options string, you'll notice that most of the options on a bias basis tend to be people buying calls, which mean they assume the stock price is going to rise. So if the stock price is at 579, a lot of people will be buying the 580 calls, hoping that the stock price will bounce up to 600 or higher once we get into Friday. And so what I think is fun about watching sort of Wall Street and how things work is to ask you to just look, if you can, at the option string and notice how it'll be call heavy for where people own the options. And so what I think is kind of fun is to watch how you'll have all these people hoping their calls will go up, and the ability of the market to sort of pull the stock price down enough below certain strike prices to cause a bunch of people's call options to expire worthless. So I think it's a fun thing to understand, because you may end up in a position, particularly if you own Tesla, where you want to hedge your position, and sort of figuring out what the price is going to be, et cetera, is going to give you sort of without having to lose or do any money. You can just sort of watch what happens on certain days of the week in particular. The other note to make from a trading standpoint about Friday and what I just described, especially with earnings coming in, is there are a lot of people that are going to have to set up their positions relative to what's going to happen at earnings. So what you're going to end up with is most of the trading tends to happen in that first hour and a half of the day and the last hour and a half of the day. So, there's a concentration, because for people who have to move large blocks of stock, if they do it in the middle part of the day when not a lot of trading occurs, their movement will cause the stock price to move in whichever direction they're trying to trade. And so blending in with other traders front or back half of the day makes a lot more sense. So we're actually hoping that you make some money as we head into earnings here for Tesla. Just asked, should we sell right now? Excellent question. And I have a couple of people who are registered reps on here, and I always get these notes for them that you're not allowed to say certain things unless you're registered with the federal government. It's an interesting circumstance, because right now we're in what I call the China world. So what that means is that the numbers that are going to be reported, made clear by what happened with the stock price recently, suggest that the sales and revenue for Tesla for this past quarter were fine. So only about 20% of what this is about is what those numbers are, and that part of it is fine. There's a second part, which is about, call it 40% of what that number is everything set in China for the blast off we think is going to happen? And if that answer is yes, that's in that second component, where we are as a stock price and it going up, I think is kind of a no-brainer. If, on the other hand, they choose to screw around and they're like, randomly, everybody in the factory got sick and we're not going to be running for 6 months. Now, that's a problem in the midterm, because we're basically looking forward to what's going to happen at earnings, because we're now going to start adding the Chinese numbers to all the numbers we're getting from the United States for this quarter. So what this all suggests then, in my mind, as an answer, is that I'm kind of hoping it dips a little bit, call it 50, 80 points, because I can get in. What I'm kind of expecting actually is something like that, is that earnings come out, stocks down 50, 80 points, and then 3 days later, after they realize all the fundamentals are solid, all the institutions with a lot of money to invest are all saying, hey, this is our chance to buy in. And so the cut in price ends up being retrenched by all these folks that now have an opportunity to get in at a better price for a well-positioned company that has, all this growth potential that's sitting there. So just remember, China was just built, Germany is being built. How many other car companies are building large numbers of factories, including the semi factory, the Cybertruck factory, et cetera, and they have the demand for the products they're producing to put them up. So, you know, nobody can predict because, as we've also shared, there are strong enough players on Wall Street in terms of amounts of money and technique to control the stock price for 24 to 48 hours. But the general market will force things in a certain direction. And I really believe that, you know, Tesla has in every way an excellent command of the environment that they're in right now and can make money in the process. So at any rate, as you can see, we're back to our old audio setup. We're working hard to improve every aspect of our show, and we've got a lot of input from you guys. And I have to admit, I was kind of stunned. I bought a new mic from Shure. It created static and was a nightmare on our last show. So we're really working to identify issues, work on improvement, and we hope you'll see a better show from us on a regular basis with every aspect of what we're doing. So there's a gentleman with ImageWire there, and he's in a place called Fairfield, California. Fairfield is actually one town away from Livermore, where we think the semi is going to be produced. So if you start seeing roadsters and semis show up a great deal in your neighborhood, we'd love to see a couple of photos placed on our Facebook page for others to enjoy. Any rate, by the way, we're looking forward to any comments or questions you might have. Any rate, wanted to remind you of our health tips. Don't forget 25 leg lifts a day. Make sure you strengthen the thigh muscles. Don't forget, don't go to bed within 2 hours of eating. Also wanted to encourage you to take a look at the 5-2 diet or some of the others in that realm. And, you know, if you're going to do fruit juices, try to do it from the actual fruit rather than, you know, just pressed away, because your body's looking for all the nutrients, not just the sugar from the fruit. At any rate, once again, thank you for your time. Please take time to like and subscribe. We're looking forward to any and all comments that you might have. And, you know, I also wanted to know, I actually developed some good friends off putting my channel together. And I don't mind responding to legitimate sort of criticisms of the show or of the logic that we're presenting, but, you know, we'll definitely ban you if you choose to just go ballistic with stuff that doesn't make sense. So, you know, and then we have enough viewers that we can ban people, and it's not a big deal. So we'd appreciate it if you'd be civil in what you choose to do. At any rate, have a great day, Jim. Thanks for the comments. Obviously, there's so many of you, I can't even note all. You know, I guess that's a survey for, there's a bunch of our viewers that are from different countries. I speak German, French, and Spanish. And so it's easy for me to do those languages, and it's fun to sort of learn different ones as you guys throw them out. So I'll probably stay in my wheelhouse. What I think I may start doing is choosing a language and adding it to the back end so I don't look silly for trying to butcher somebody else's language. Any rate, in German we say Tschüss, macht's gut. French, au revoir, lehitrot, Khoda hafez. Farsi, hedge do. Swedish, do widzenia. I believe that's Polish. And Stada is ni hao ma, Chinese. And in Jamaica we say no respect wa good man. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to your comments after show.